The last thing I remember before the bright ER lights blurred into one endless white glow was my wife's face looking down at me. She wasn't scared. She wasn't worried. She looked annoyed. "Mara," I tried to say, but my throat was so dry the word barely came out. Every breath felt like steel wire tightening around my chest. The monitor beside me shrieked as my oxygen levels continued to fall. A nurse quickly adjusted the oxygen mask over my face and called for the attending physician. The attending was my wife. Dr. Mara Vale was one of the most respected emergency physicians in the hospital. Calm under pressure, brilliant in a crisis. She was the kind of doctor families prayed for when someone they loved came through those ER doors fighting for their life. 7 years earlier, she had been an exhausted resident studying flashcards at our kitchen table, while I worked extra shifts to help pay the bills and support her dream. I truly believed every sacrifice we made together would mean something someday. I believed marriage meant walking through life side by side. Then I heard another voice behind the curtain. "Mara, I'm sorry. I didn't know where else to go." She turned so fast her ID badge swung against her chest. Even through the fever and the haze clouding my mind, I recognized that voice immediately. Adrian Cross, her ex. He walked into the trauma bay wearing an expensive charcoal coat and designer sneakers, looking pale and fragile, like someone who had mastered the art of appearing helpless. One hand rested dramatically against his chest while the other gripped his phone. He glanced at me on the stretcher before looking back at Mara. "Oh," he said quietly, "I didn't realize Nolan was here." Those words should have sounded concerned. Instead, they sounded satisfied. The nurse beside me checked my monitor again. "Dr. Vale, his blood pressure is still dropping. His lactate is high. ICU bed 7 is ready." Those words stuck in my mind. Before becoming a compliance consultant, I had worked in hospitals. I knew exactly what high lactate, low blood pressure, infection, and falling oxygen levels meant. I knew what happened when nurses stopped making small talk and suddenly started moving with urgency. My body was losing the fight. Mara looked at the monitor, then at Adrian. He lowered his eyes. "My EKG was abnormal," he said softly. "I'm dizzy. I don't want to overreact, but after what happened last year." He didn't even finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I watched my wife's expression soften in a way it hadn't softened for me all night. She reached out and gently placed her hand on Adrian's arm. "Nolan is stable enough for step-down observation," she said calmly. The nurse froze. "Doctor." Mara didn't even look at me. "Move Mr. Cross to ICU bed 7 for cardiac monitoring." For a second, I honestly thought the fever had made me hear it wrong. Then the nurse spoke carefully. "ICU bed 7 was assigned to your husband." Mara's jaw tightened. "My husband is alert and responsive. Adrian has a cardiac history." I tried to lift my hand, but the 4 tape held it in place. "Mara." She finally looked at me, not like my wife, like a doctor irritated by a difficult patient. "Don't start," she said quietly. "Don't start." I was lying there struggling to breathe, shaking so hard my teeth hurt, wearing an oxygen mask while my body fought to stay alive. And my wife told me not to start. Adrian stepped closer to my bed, speaking loudly enough for everyone else to hear. "Nolan, I'm sure you understand. Mara's just making the safest decision." Then he glanced at my monitor, leaned closer, and whispered so only I could hear. "She always comes when I need her." My hands clenched into fists beneath the blanket. Mara heard him. I know she did, but she said nothing. Instead, she pulled the curtain halfway closed and told the nurse, "Chart him as stable for observation. Transfer Mr. Cross now." The nurse's face immediately lost its color. "Nolan hasn't consented to being downgraded." Mara's voice turned cold. "I gave the order." That was the exact moment something inside me changed. I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I was suddenly clear. For years, I had made excuses for Mara. She was exhausted. The ER was stressful. She forgot birthdays because of impossible schedules. She came home distant because work drained her. Whenever she snapped at me, I convinced myself it was because I was her safe place. But standing under the harsh fluorescent lights of St. Aurelia Medical Center, watching the last available ICU bed roll away from me and toward the man who had once broken her heart, I finally understood the truth. I had never been her priority. I had simply been convenient. The nurse leaned close enough that only I could hear her. Her badge read Tessa Monroe. "Mr. Hale," she whispered gently, "don't try to talk. I'll keep a close eye on you." Ignoring the pain, I looked past her toward the computer mounted on the wall. The transfer board on the wall still showed my name next to ICU bed 7. Hale Nolan. ICU bed assigned. 2114. Then Mara reached over and clicked a few keys. The screen refreshed. Cross, Adrian. ICU bed assigned. 2119. My name disappeared from the ICU list and was reassigned to Observation Bay 3, a hallway bed. I had spent the last 10 years auditing hospital systems like this. I knew exactly how they worked. Hospitals trusted software because software remembered the things people wished they could erase. Every click, every override, every edited note, every badge swipe, every decision disguised as professional judgment left a trail. My breathing caught. Tessa adjusted my oxygen mask. "Mr. Hale, stay with me." I forced myself to speak. "Who's the bed coordinator tonight?" Her eyes flickered. "Don't worry about that right now." "Name." She hesitated before quietly answering. "Sanjay Patel. Charge nurse Leah Grant." I closed my eyes for just a second. Not because I was giving up, because I was saving every bit of strength I had left. About 10 minutes later, Mara returned to my bedside. By then, Adrian was already being wheeled down the hallway, wrapped in warm blankets, with my wife walking beside him as if he were the real emergency. She stopped beside my curtain. "You'll be fine," she said. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." I stared at her. This was the same woman who had once cried because she'd accidentally stepped on our dog's paw. Now she had handed my ICU bed to another man and expected me to feel grateful simply because I wasn't dead yet. As Adrian's bed rolled past, he lifted his head and looked at me. He smiled. Small, private, ugly. I wanted to yell. I wanted to rip the 4 from my arm and stand up. I wanted to ask my wife how many years of marriage it took before a husband's life mattered more than an ex-boyfriend's comfort. But my body was shaking too violently. So I did the only thing I still had the strength to do. I looked at the transfer board one last time. I memorized the time, 2119. Then I looked straight at Mara and said through the oxygen mask, "You changed the log." For the first time that night, I saw fear flash across her face. Only for a second. Then it disappeared. "You're feverish," she replied. Maybe I was. But I was also fully awake. And I was done making excuses for her. I don't remember much of the next hour. I remember how cold the hallway was. I remember someone parking my bed beside a supply closet because every observation bay was already full. I remember the portable monitor balanced on a rolling stand, the sharp smell of disinfectant mixing with the sour smell of sweat soaking through my clothes. I remember Mara walking past me twice. The first time, she didn't even slow down. The second time, she stopped only because Adrian called her name from the ICU hallway. "Nolan looks awful," he said. He sounded amused. Mara glanced at me the way someone looks at an unfinished chart left open at the nurse's station. "He's always looked worse than he is." Those words hurt more than the fever because I'd heard them before. When I told her I was exhausted from paying the mortgage and helping cover her brother's bills, she accused me of acting burdened. When I told her my mother felt unwelcome at Thanksgiving because Mara's parents kept calling her simple, she said my mother was too sensitive. When I asked why Adrian kept texting her after midnight, she called me insecure. It was always the same. My pain was an exaggeration. Her loyalty to everyone else was compassion. My boundaries were selfish. Her betrayals were simply complicated. Around midnight, everything changed. The monitor suddenly screamed. My vision narrowed into a tunnel. Someone shouted my blood pressure. Another voice yelled for fluids. Tessa rushed to my side, and for the first time since I'd arrived, the calm expression she'd been wearing disappeared. "Mr. Hale, can you hear me?" I tried to answer. Nothing came out. A resident I didn't recognize leaned over my bed. "Why the hell is this patient in observation?" Tessa answered immediately. "He was reassigned from ICU." "By who?" For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Tessa quietly said, "Dr. Vale." The resident muttered a curse under his breath. Everything went black before I heard anything else. When I opened my eyes again, dawn had turned the window blinds gray. I was finally in the ICU. Not bed 7. Bed 2. A central line had been placed in my neck. Antibiotics dripped steadily into my veins. My throat felt raw, and every part of my body ached beneath the maze of tubes and wires keeping me alive. Tessa stood near the doorway with her arms folded, watching the monitor like she didn't completely trust it. "You scared us," she said softly. I turned my head. My voice came out rough and broken. "Adrian." Her mouth tightened. "Comfortable." That single word told me everything I needed to know. I closed my eyes. Tessa stepped closer. "I'm not supposed to tell you this." "Then don't." "I'm going to anyway." I looked back at her. She looked exhausted, angry, afraid. Then she quietly said, "Your chart says you refused the ICU transfer at 9:16 p.m. For several long seconds, the only sound in the room was the steady beeping of the machines. "I never refused," I said. "I know," Tessa replied quietly. "Who entered that note?" She hesitated. "I can't access that level of the audit from here." But she didn't have to say anything else. I had spent years investigating hospital compliance cases. I knew how nurses survived. They chose every word carefully because one wrong sentence could cost them their job. When a nurse said, "I can't access that level," it often meant someone with authority had done something they couldn't openly talk about. I looked at her. "Can I request my medical records as a patient?" "Yes. All of them. It takes time." "Then start the patient portal release today." She nodded once. My voice was weak, but steady. "I also want the name of the patient advocate." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Mr. Hale." "Nolan." She let out a slow breath. "Nolan, you need to rest." "I rested for 7 years." The words slipped out before I could stop them. Tessa looked away. Maybe she'd watched enough marriages fall apart inside hospital rooms to know that sometimes silence was kinder than sympathy. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small notepad, and wrote down a name. "Patient Relations. Evelyn Rusk." She tore off the page and quietly slid it beneath my phone. "Don't tell anyone I gave this to you." "I won't." After she left, I lay there listening to the rhythm of my own heartbeat echo through the monitor. Yes, I had helped Mara through medical school, but I hadn't stopped being myself. Before I became a medical compliance consultant, I had been an ER nurse. Before marriage slowly turned me into the man who cooked late-night dinners, apologized for asking for basic respect, and kept making excuses for someone who stopped choosing him. I knew exactly how hospitals worked. More importantly, I knew how hospital lies were uncovered. The chart mattered. Every note mattered. The bed management system mattered. Badge swipes mattered. Timestamps mattered. Who opened my chart? Who changed my status? Who overrode the ICU assignment? Who documented that I refused treatment? Who decided Adrian needed critical care? People could lie. Audit logs never did. At exactly 8:40 that morning, Mara walked into my ICU room. She wore fresh scrubs, her hair neatly tied back, looking like she'd gotten a full night's sleep. I hadn't slept for a second. If you're enjoying our stories, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to us and helps us create more amazing content for you. We're on a mission to reach our first 1,000 subscribers, and every single subscription brings us one step closer. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Thank you for being part of our journey. She stood at the foot of my bed, staring at the tubes running into my body. A wife might have cried. Mara frowned. "You filed a patient relations request." "Not." "How are you?" "Not." I was terrified. "Not." "I'm sorry. The first thing my wife said after I nearly died was about paperwork." I looked at her for a long moment. "Yes." She sighed. "Nolan." Do you understand what that looks like? What does it look like? Like you're trying to punish me. I almost laughed, but even that hurt my chest. You moved me out of the ICU. You were stable when I made that decision. My blood pressure crashed afterward. Silence. My chart also says I refused the transfer. Her face stayed perfectly calm, but I noticed her hands. Her thumb slowly rubbed against the side of her index finger. Tiny habit. One I'd learned during our first year of marriage whenever she wasn't telling me the whole truth. I don't handle charting after transfer orders, she said. That isn't an answer. It's the only answer you're getting while you're like this. Like what? Emotional. Sick. Looking for someone to blame. There it was again. My pain was an inconvenience. My memory was unreliable. My survival itself had become an accusation against her. I turned my head toward the window. Mara. What? Leave. She blinked. What did you say? I don't want you in my room. Color rushed into her face. I am your wife. No, I said quietly. You're the doctor who gave my ICU bed to her ex. The words landed between us like shattered glass. For the first time since she'd walked in, she glanced toward the doorway, almost afraid someone might have heard. That reaction told me everything. Nolan, she whispered. Lower your voice. I didn't. Get out. She stepped closer. You need to be careful. You're angry, and I understand that. But if you keep making accusations, you could ruin everything I've worked for. Everything she had worked for. Not everything we had built. Not our marriage. Not my life. Her career. Her reputation. Her white coat. In that moment, I finally understood the bargain she expected me to make. I had almost died. She wanted me to stay silent. No, I said. Her expression hardened. No, no. The heart monitor continued its steady rhythm. My voice was barely above a whisper, but it was the strongest thing I'd said all day. I'm requesting every record. Mara stared at me. Then she spoke the sentence that finally killed whatever remained of our marriage. After everything I've become, you're really going to drag me down over one bed? One bed. That's how she described it. Not my ICU bed. Not the decision that nearly cost me my life. Not the moment she chose another man over her husband. Just one bed. I closed my eyes. Leave before I call security. She stood there for another few seconds, breathing hard, as if she wanted to argue. Then she turned around and walked out. This time, as the door closed behind her, I felt only one thing. Relief. By the third day, I could finally sit up without feeling like the room was tilting beneath me. By the fourth day, I was strong enough to read. That's when the first batch of my medical records appeared in the patient portal. It wasn't everything. Hospitals never released everything at once. But it was enough. The admission summary listed exactly what I expected. Arrived febrile, hypotensive, hypoxic, suspected sepsis secondary to pneumonia. ICU consult accepted. Bed assigned. Then, 16 minutes later, another entry appeared. Patient declined ICU transfer. Prefers observation pending reassessment. I read the sentence once, then again, and again. 6 times in total. Patient declined. Prefers observation. My hands were shaking by the time I set the tablet down. I had been too weak to sit up, too short of breath to speak more than a few words, too sick to argue with anyone. Yet somehow my chart claimed I had calmly refused life-saving treatment. Whoever entered that note hadn't just moved me out of the ICU. They had tried to make it look like it was my decision. I picked up my phone and called a number I hadn't used in nearly 3 years. Daniel Price. Dan. It's Nolan Hale. There was a brief pause. Nolan. Damn. It's been a long time. I need a malpractice attorney. His voice immediately changed. Tell me. I need someone who understands hospital audit trails. Another pause. What happened? My wife gave my ICU bed to her ex, and someone entered a chart note saying I refused the transfer. Silence. Then he asked the only question that mattered. Are you safe now? Yes. Do you have the records? Only part of them. Good. Listen carefully. His tone became firm. Don't discuss this with hospital administration by yourself. Don't sign anything. And don't let your wife access your patient portal. I'm sending you to someone. She's the best medical negligence attorney in the state, especially when hospital licensing and audit records are involved. I don't want money, I said. Not yet. What do you want? I looked back at the false note on the screen. I want the truth preserved before someone buries it. Dan's voice dropped. Then move fast. That afternoon, Mara came back. This time she was carrying flowers. White lilies. I'd always hated lilies in hospitals. They smelled like funerals pretending to be clean. She placed the vase on the counter and smoothed the front of her white coat. You look better. Better than dead. Her jaw tightened. Don't be cruel. I laughed once. It hurt. She glanced toward the hallway before pulling the visitor's chair closer to my bed. Nolan. We need to talk like adults. We needed to talk like adults before you changed the ICU assignment. I made a medical decision. No. I looked straight at her. You made a personal decision and dressed it up as a medical one. Her expression hardened. You're not a doctor. No. I held her gaze. I'm the patient whose chart says he refused treatment that he never refused. The color slowly drained from her face. That was the confirmation I'd been looking for. She knew. Mara. My voice stayed calm. Who entered that note? She leaned toward me. Please. Just listen. There are things you don't understand about emergency medicine. Airflow, hospital pressure, VIP patients, liability. Who entered the note? You're focusing on the wrong thing. I almost died. And you didn't. I stared at her. The silence that followed those 3 words was colder than any hospital hallway. A second later, she realized what she'd said. Nolan, I didn't mean. Yes, I cut her off. You did. For the first time, her composure cracked. Adrian was panicking, she said. He has a medical history. He called me because he trusted me. I was already your patient. You were already being treated. He needed comfort. I needed intensive care. He needed monitoring. He needed my ICU bed. She flinched. Then the anger took over. You have no idea what kind of pressure I'm under, she snapped. Every decision I make gets judged. Every patient thinks they're the priority. Of all people, you should understand how triage works. I do understand triage. My voice stayed steady. That's exactly how I know Adrian didn't outrank me. Her eyes flashed. You've always resented him. No. I shook my head. I've always resented becoming invisible every time he showed up. For just a moment, I caught a glimpse of the woman I used to know. The exhausted resident who used to fall asleep with her head resting on my shoulder. The woman who once told me I made the world feel survivable. Then she disappeared again. Mara looked at the tablet beside my bed. You requested more records? Yes. Nolan. There was real panic in her voice now. If you care about me at all. Stop. I almost admired how bold that was. Care about you? My career isn't just a job, she said. It's my whole life. I was your husband. I paused. That was supposed to matter too. It does. I slowly shook my head. No. It mattered. Until Adrian walked through those doors. Her eyes filled with tears, but they felt practiced. I made one mistake, she whispered. One decision under pressure. And the false refusal note? She said nothing. I reached over, picked up my phone, and opened the recording app. Her eyes followed every movement. We're in a one-party consent state, I said calmly. I already checked. Mara stood up so quickly the chair scraped across the floor. You're recording me? I'm protecting myself, I said. From my wife. From the doctor who falsified my medical record. Her face tightened. I didn't falsify anything. Then you won't have any problem with an audit. The word hit her harder than anything else I'd said. Hospitals feared lawsuits. Doctors feared medical boards. But the people who altered records feared audits most of all. Audit logs didn't care about reputations, marriages, tears, or excuses. They only recorded the truth. Whose badge was used, whose login made the change, what time it happened, what was edited. Mara gripped the back of the chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. You owe me more than this. Something old and exhausted inside me finally woke up. I owed you 7 years of partnership. I paused. I gave you 10. I owed you loyalty. I stayed silent every time you humiliated me. I owed you support. I paid your exam fees, your rent, your car insurance, your brother's legal bills, your parents' medical expenses, and helped build half the life you now act like you created on your own. She stared at me in shock. I'd never said any of it out loud before. That was my mistake, I continued. When you never acknowledge everything you give, entitled people eventually start believing it was never a gift at all. I looked her straight in the eyes. But I do not owe you my death. Her expression collapsed. Nolan, please. Her voice cracked. No, I'll fix this. You can't. I'll talk to Adrian. Adrian doesn't matter. He does. I know, I said quietly. That's the problem. She froze. I reached for the tablet beside my bed and opened the email I'd drafted earlier that morning to a divorce attorney. I'm filing. Her lips parted. For what? Divorce. The word seemed to knock the air out of her lungs. For years, she'd always believed I might get angry, that I might leave the room, sleep on the couch, refuse to speak to her for a day or two. But divorce? That happened to other couples, other husbands, men with harder hearts and easier exits. Not Nolan Hale, the man who warmed her dinner after midnight, the man who texted drive safe even when she forgot to come home. You don't mean that, she whispered. I do. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks. You're sick. You're scared. You're just lashing out. No. I shook my head. I'm thinking clearly. We're family. I held her gaze. No. My family wouldn't take away my ICU bed. My family wouldn't forge a refusal I never made. She took a step backward as though I'd slapped her. A knock interrupted the silence. Tessa stepped into the room. The moment she saw Mara, she stopped. Mr. Hale, she said gently. Patient relations is ready for your call. Mara turned toward her. You contacted them again? For the first time since I'd been admitted, I smiled. No. My attorney did. The color drained from Mara's face. Behind her, out in the hallway, Adrian Cross stood holding a cup of coffee. He watched Mara panic with the faintest hint of a smile. That was the moment everything became clear. He hadn't come to the emergency room because he thought he was dying. He came because he wanted to know whether Mara would still choose him. She had. Now both of them were about to learn something they hadn't counted on. Every choice leaves a record. The hospital tried to handle everything carefully, which meant they handled it badly. First came Evelyn Rusk from Patient Relations. She wore a navy blazer and the carefully practiced expression of someone trained to sound compassionate without admitting anything. She spoke softly, called my experience concerning, and assured me that St. Aurelia Medical Center took every patient safety issue seriously. I'd heard that sentence many times during my years in compliance meetings. It usually meant one thing. We're worried. Just not worried enough to tell the truth yet. About 20 minutes later, Priya-san arrived. She was small, calm, and carried a thin leather folder that looked almost harmless. It wasn't. She shook my hand carefully, glanced at the monitors beside my bed and said, Mr. Hale, I've reviewed the records you've received so far, along with your written summary. If you approve, I'm sending a preservation letter immediately. I noticed Evelyn's expression change. Ms. San, she said politely, there's really no need to make this adversarial. Priya never even looked at her. There is always a need to preserve evidence when a septic patient is removed from an assigned ICU bed and a refusal note appears without the patient's confirmation. The room suddenly felt colder. Evelyn folded her hands together. Of course, we'll cooperate. Priya smiled politely. Excellent. We'll need the complete bed management logs, the electronic health record audit trail, badge access records, transfer communications, the charge nurse assignment sheet, ICU admission criteria for both Mr. Hale and Mr. Cross, and every second of security footage from the ER hallway between 9 o'clock and 10:30 that evening. Evelyn's jaw tightened. That may take some time. The preservation letter will be delivered in 5 minutes. Only then did Priya look directly at her. Take all the time you need. She paused. After you've preserved everything. That was the difference between asking and knowing exactly how to aim. I watched Evelyn quietly leave the room. Priya turned back to me. Your wife is Dr. Vale? Yes. She nodded. I need to ask you something directly. Are you prepared for what happens if the audit logs confirm exactly what you believe they will? I am. Even saying the next words hurt. Even if it ends her career. I looked toward the door Mara had walked through only minutes earlier. She made that choice the moment she gave away my ICU bed. Priya nodded once. Good. Then we'll do this the right way. Cleanly. That word mattered. Clean. No hacking. No shouting. No threats. No angry social media posts. No fantasies about revenge that could blur the truth. Just the records. Just the law. Just the consequences. By that evening, whispers had already started spreading through the hospital. Not officially, of course. Hospitals never gossiped officially. But the nurses stopped pretending they didn't recognize me. Residents glanced into my room, then quickly looked away. 2 ICU techs were quietly talking outside my curtain until Tessa walked by and said, Go whisper somewhere else. Mara never came back. Adrian did. He arrived at exactly 7:15 p.m. Wearing a soft gray sweater and carrying a bouquet of flowers that clearly wasn't meant for me. He stopped outside the glass wall of my ICU room before asking a nurse loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Is Nolan accepting visitors? I'd hate for him to feel isolated. Tessa stepped directly into his path. He's resting. Adrian smiled. I'm practically family. You're not on his visitor list. His smile tightened. From my bed I spoke. Let him in. Tessa looked at me. You sure? Yes. Adrian walked into the room like an actor stepping onto a stage. He looked around slowly. Nice, he said. So, you got upgraded after all. I picked up the bed remote and raised myself a little higher. What do you want? Just checking on you. Try again. He let out a quiet laugh. You've always been direct. He smiled. That's one of the things Mara liked about you in the beginning. At the beginning, I replied. She also said you made life simple. I didn't say anything else. Adrian took another step closer and lowered his voice. But simple gets boring, doesn't it? A woman like Mara eventually needs someone who understands pressure. Legacy. Ambition. You mean someone who fakes chest pain to get an ICU bed. The warmth disappeared from his face. Careful. No. He glanced toward the hallway before looking back at me. You know what your problem is, Nolan? You think being a good man means people owe you love. I studied him for a moment. No. I think being married means my wife shouldn't risk my life for her ex. His smile returned. You're alive. People kept saying those 2 words as if surviving erased everything that had happened. Maybe because it does, he replied. Oddly enough, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't jealous either. All I felt was a strange, quiet disgust. Adrian folded his arms. Mara's under enough pressure already. If you really love her, you won't drag her through some complaint process. She asked you to tell me that. He didn't answer. His silence lasted only a second. It was enough. I nodded. So she sent the man who took my ICU bed to ask me for mercy. I didn't take anything. He shrugged. She gave it to me. There it was. Simple. Ugly. True. The door opened. Tessa walked in. 2 hospital security officers followed behind her. Adrian turned around. What is this? I looked at Tessa. Please document that Mr. Cross entered my room after being told he wasn't on my visitor list and that this visit was unwanted. Adrian laughed. You're serious? Very. Security politely asked him to leave. As they escorted him toward the door, he looked back at me. For the first time, the gentle mask slipped away. "You're going to regret making her choose." I smiled. She already did. The hallway outside had gone completely quiet. Nurses, a resident, 2 transport staff. Everyone was watching. Adrian realized far too late that he had an audience. His expression changed instantly. He hurried to put the fragile, sympathetic mask back on. But it no longer fit. "Nolan, I only meant." "No." I spoke loudly enough for everyone in the hallway to hear. "You meant my wife chose you once. And you wanted to see if she'd choose you again." I caught Tessa glancing toward the nurse's station. Adrian's face flushed bright red. Security guided him down the hallway. I never raised my voice again. I didn't have to. Public humiliation works best when the truth doesn't need embellishment. That night, Mara called me 12 times. I ignored every call. At 11:03 p.m. a text message appeared. "You humiliated Adrian in front of my staff." I stared at the screen. Not. "He humiliated you." Not. "He never should have come." Not. "I'm sorry. Just. Adrian." Always Adrian. I typed a single sentence. "Tell your lawyer to contact mine." The typing indicator appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally, her reply came. "Don't do this to us." I looked around the ICU room. The monitors. The 4 bags. The bruises covering my arms. The empty place where ICU bed 7 should have been mine from the beginning. Then I replied, "There is no us." 8 days later, I was discharged. Mara didn't come to take me home. My neighbor June did. She was 62, widowed, sharp-tongued, and the kind of woman who had once threatened to call the police because a teenager kicked the elevator door in our apartment building. She drove me home in her old Subaru, grumbling almost the entire trip. Doctors think that just because they can pronounce things in Latin, they get to play God. I leaned back against the passenger seat, too exhausted to smile properly. "Not all doctors." She snorted. "No. Just the ones who marry decent men and forget what decency looks like." June carried my bag upstairs with me. When we reached my apartment door, she stopped. "You need soup," June said. "I've got some in the freezer." "That means no." She ignored me. 20 minutes later, she was back at my door with a container of homemade soup, fresh bread, and one final warning. "Don't let that woman cry her way back into your life before your stitches heal." I almost smiled. "I don't have stitches." June pointed a finger at me. "Emotional stitches count." Then she left. I stood alone in the living room, looking around at what used to be our life. The apartment wasn't really an apartment. It was a townhouse. I'd bought it 4 years before our wedding using money I'd saved from travel nursing contracts and the life insurance my father had left me. Mara hated it at first. She said it was too narrow, too quiet, too far from all the restaurants she liked. Then her co-workers started complimenting the exposed brick walls and the rooftop deck. Suddenly, it became our little city gem. Her coat still hung in the hallway closet. Her running shoes were still by the front door. A framed photo from our courthouse wedding sat on the shelf. In it, we were both laughing because the clerk had mispronounced Mara's name. I picked up the frame. Then I turned it face down. The following evening, my attorney officially sent the separation notice. Mara didn't respond through her lawyer. She responded through her family. Her mother called first. "Nolan," Celeste Vale said, her voice heavy with disappointment. "Whatever happened at the hospital, this isn't how family behaves." I was sitting at my kitchen table with prescription bottles lined up beside my laptop. "Mrs. Vale, your daughter can speak to me through legal counsel." "Oh, don't be ridiculous." She sighed dramatically. "You're angry because Mara had to make a difficult medical decision. Doctors make difficult decisions every day. She falsified my medical record." Another sigh. "You always did enjoy making yourself sound more important than you are." There it was. The family motto. Nolan is useful, but never impressive. Nolan pays, but never decides. Nolan is family when the bills arrive. and an outsider whenever respect is being handed out. She continued, "We're having dinner tomorrow night. You'll come. Mara will be there. Everyone will calm down." "No." Silence. Then, "What do you mean, no?" "I mean exactly that. Nolan, don't embarrass yourself. This childish legal tantrum has gone far enough." I said no. I ended the call. 10 seconds later, my phone buzzed. A text from Mara. "Please just come. Mom is upset. Dad wants to talk. We can work this out privately." Privately. The favorite word of people who don't want witnesses. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied, "Fine. One dinner. Public enough for the truth." The Vale family dinner was held at Celeste and Richard's home. A sprawling glass and stone house in Westbridge Hills. It looked expensive because I'd personally helped save it from foreclosure twice. Mara opened the front door. She looked thinner. Not broken. Not yet. "Nolan," she said quietly. I walked past her without answering. The dining room was already full. Her parents, her younger brother, Landon, 2 cousins, an aunt, and sitting beside Richard Vale with a glass of wine, despite the heart scare that supposedly justified taking my ICU bed. Adrian Cross. My eyes settled on him. Mara noticed immediately. "He came to support me," she said. "Of course he did." Adrian casually raised his wine glass. "Glad you're back on your feet." I looked at Mara. "You actually thought this would help?" Her cheeks flushed. Celeste clapped her hands together. "Everyone, let's sit down before this becomes unpleasant." It became unpleasant the moment you invited the man who took my ICU bed. Richard Vale lightly slapped his palm against the table. "Enough. You will not speak like that in my house." I slowly looked around the room. The crystal chandelier, the catered dinner, the imported wine. The same people who had spent years benefiting from my money while acting as though I should be grateful just to belong. "Your house," I repeated. Richard narrowed his eyes. "Yes. Interesting." Mara gently touched my sleeve. "Nolan, please." Without saying a word, I removed her hand. Dinner lasted exactly 7 minutes before Celeste began her performance. "We all understand emotions are running high," she said. "But Mara has devoted her entire life to saving people. One questionable decision shouldn't erase all of that." One questionable decision almost erased me. Landon snorted. "Oh, come on. You're sitting here. You're fine." I looked directly at him. "Your bail payment cleared just fine too." The entire table froze. Landon slowly lowered his fork. "What?" I opened the folder I'd brought with me and placed the first document on the table. $8,000 for your DUI attorney. $12,000 to settle the lawsuit after you damaged your landlord's property. 6 months of rent after your mother said you were just between opportunities. Celeste's face tightened. "This is vulgar." "No." I calmly shook my head. "What's vulgar is asking the man you constantly belittle to keep financing your family." "Nolan," Mara whispered. I placed another document on the table. "Your parents' home equity delinquency. I covered $22,000 2 years ago." Richard stood. "You offered." "Yes, I did." I met his eyes. "That was before your daughter gave my ICU bed to her ex. And before this family called me childish for refusing to stay quiet." Adrian let out a quiet laugh. "You brought bank statements to a family dinner?" I looked at him. "No. I brought clarity." Then I placed the third document on the table. "The deed to my townhouse." Celeste frowned. "What is that?" "My property records." The moment I said it, Mara's expression changed. She already knew where this was going. I looked around the table at her family. "The townhouse belongs to me. I bought it before we were married with my own money. Mara's name was never added to the deed, even though this family asked me to do it more than once." Celeste opened her mouth to speak, but I kept going. "As of this week, I've canceled every automatic payment that I'm not legally obligated to make." I looked at each of them in turn. "That includes Landon's rent assistance. Your supplemental medical insurance. the lease payments on Mara's SUV, and the household account Mara has been using to cover family expenses. The room exploded. Landon shot to his feet. You can't just cut everyone off. I can. I looked him in the eye. And I already did. Celeste pointed a finger at me. After everything Mara has done for you? I leaned back in my chair. What exactly did she do for me? Silence. It was amazing how quickly entitled people ran out of words when you asked them to list their own generosity. Richard finally spoke. She gave you status. I laughed. Not loudly. Just enough. Status. I shook my head. Your daughter gave me sepsis in a hospital hallway. Mara flinched as if I'd slapped her. Adrian quietly set down his wineglass. You're being dramatic. I turned toward him. You had no ICU-level cardiac markers. No sustained arrhythmia. No elevated troponin. No unstable vital signs. You were admitted for cardiac monitoring only after a physician override. For the first time that evening, his confidence slipped. How would you know that? I smiled. You'd be surprised what patients are allowed to learn when their own care is compromised. Stop. Mara's voice was barely above a whisper. Nolan. Please. I looked at her. No, Mara. This is the part where everyone hears the truth before your family starts telling people I've lost my mind. Celeste's eyes narrowed. You're trying to destroy my daughter. I'm divorcing her. The words hit the table harder than Richard's hand ever had. Mara grabbed the back of her chair to steady herself. Nolan. I met her eyes. I told you in the hospital. I thought you were just angry. No. I was finally awake. Adrian stood up too. Mara, you don't have to sit here and listen to this. I turned the folder toward him. Actually, you should. Your name is included in the complaint. He went completely still. What complaint? The hospital's internal investigation. The complaint to the state medical board. And the civil preservation request. The dining room fell silent. For the first time, they understood. This wasn't an angry husband throwing a tantrum. This was a documented case. Mara's voice broke. You filed with the medical board? Yes. My career. She could barely get the words out. Was in your hands. It was in yours. I looked at her. At 9:19 that night, she swayed slightly. For the first time since I'd arrived, no one rushed to comfort her. They were all staring at the papers spread across the table. They were finally realizing that the man they treated like an endless bank account had decided to close it. I stood. Celeste looked up sharply. Where are you going? Home. Mara hurried after me. Nolan. Wait. I stopped on the front porch. The night air was cold. She wrapped her arms around herself. You didn't have to do that in front of everyone. I looked at her. You invited them. I thought they could help calm you down. They did. She frowned. They reminded me exactly why I'm leaving. Tears filled her eyes. You're really going to take everything? For a moment, I simply stared at her. Even now, she still didn't understand. No, Mara. I shook my head slowly. I'm taking back what was already mine. Behind her, through the front window, I could see Adrian looking down at his phone. He wasn't comforting her. He wasn't defending her. He was already putting distance between himself and the mess. I looked back at my wife. You should pay close attention to the man you chose. Then I walked to my car. For the first time, she didn't follow me. The first thing Mara lost wasn't her job. It was the belief that I would keep making her life easy while she called me selfish. Monday morning proved that. Her car wouldn't be taken away, but the payment failed. When Mara became an attending physician, she'd insisted she needed a vehicle that matched her position. The midnight blue electric SUV was leased with my co-signature. It was insured under my policy. The monthly payments came directly from my bank account. My attorney made sure everything was handled legally. No surprise repossession. No illegal cancellation. Just formal notice. A demand to transfer responsibility. And the end of every voluntary payment. At 7:04 that morning, Mara called. I let it ring. A text appeared. The car payment failed. A minute later. Nolan. I'm scheduled at 7:30. Then another. This isn't funny. At 7:22, one more message arrived. Congratulations. You're affecting patient care now. I replied with a single sentence. Your transportation is your responsibility. My attorney sent the legal notice on Friday. Her response came almost immediately. You know I don't check legal emails before my shifts. I stared at the screen for a long moment. She didn't check legal emails, but she'd always managed to read Adrian's midnight texts. By noon, she'd called 9 more times. I ignored everyone. A little later, Priya forwarded me a letter from Mara's attorney. She had finally hired one. His name was Franklin Moss. His first letter accused me of using financial pressure during what he described as an ongoing period of emotional reconciliation. Priya called me laughing. Emotional reconciliation? She said. I asked her to leave my ICU room. I couldn't help smiling. Apparently, that's considered romance now. By Tuesday, Mara's family finally realized I wasn't bluffing. The financial support was gone. Landon texted me first. Bro, this is between you and Mara. Don't drag my rent into it. I replied. Exactly. Your rent was never my responsibility. He answered with 3 long paragraphs about loyalty. I archived the conversation without reading the rest. Celeste left a voicemail saying my behavior was beneath a man. I saved it. Richard emailed me a spreadsheet listing every family expense that had been historically managed by Nolan, as though giving my financial support a title somehow made it everyone's property. I forwarded the email to Priya. A few minutes later she replied, beautiful. Entitlement in writing is always useful. Meanwhile, Mara tried every version of herself. There was angry Mara. You're punishing everyone because you're jealous of Adrian. Then came gentle Mara. I know you're hurting. I miss my husband. Next was Dr. Mara. You're not being clinically objective about what happened. Then victim Mara. I can't sleep anymore. Is that what you wanted? Finally came wife Mara. Come home. We can talk without lawyers. But through all of it, she never said the one sentence that actually mattered. I'm sorry I risked your life. Wednesday morning brought the first real crack in the hospital's wall. Priya called while I was making tea. They've released the preliminary audit summary. I slowly set my mug on the counter. And your medical chart was accessed using Mara's credentials at 9:15 p.m., 9:18 p.m., and again at 12:42 a.m. The kitchen suddenly felt much smaller. Midnight? Yes. After your condition had already deteriorated. What did she change? She modified a narrative field. Priya paused. The refusal note itself appears under another clinician's template at 9:16. But the audit trail shows that the addendum was opened from Mara's active session. I took a slow breath. Can they argue someone else used her login? They can try. But her badge access records place her at the physician workstation in Zone C during that exact time. I closed my eyes. There it was. Not suspicion. Not emotion. Not memory. Data. Mara's badge. Mara's login session. Mara's edits. What about Adrian? His vital signs remained stable. His initial complaint was anxiety, palpitations, and dizziness. Cardiac labs were negative. The ICU admission required an attending physician override. Approved by Mara. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. For years I'd searched for proof of smaller betrayals. Proof that she lied when she claimed Adrian was just going through a difficult time. Proof she'd deleted messages. Proof she'd mocked me with her family. Proof that I wasn't imagining how all her kindness seemed reserved for everyone except me. Now I finally had proof. Of the one thing I wished had never happened. Send me everything. I will. Priya hesitated. Nolan. Yes. This is strong. How strong? Strong enough to end a career. She paused. Unless the hospital destroys itself trying to protect her. My eyes drifted toward the wedding photo still sitting face down on the shelf. They won't be able to protect her forever. No, Priya replied. Not with a paper trail like this. That afternoon, Mara came to the townhouse. I knew she was outside before she knocked. June called first. "She's here," June said, wearing the face. What face? The sad, pretty face women wear when they know the neighbors are watching. I walked to the front door. I didn't open it. Mara knocked softly. "Nolan." I stayed silent. "I know you're home." Still nothing. She lowered her voice. "Please. I only need 10 minutes. You can speak through your attorney." The warmth disappeared from her voice immediately. "So you're really going to hide behind lawyers?" I opened the door just enough for the security chain to hold it in place. Mara looked smaller than she had in the hospital. Her hair was tied back carelessly. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She looked exhausted, but underneath the exhaustion, there was anger. "You cut off my car. I stopped paying for it. You knew that would embarrass me." I looked at her steadily. "Like being parked in a hallway while your ex took my ICU bed?" She flinched. "Nolan, I told you Adrian's situation was complicated. The audit logs aren't." Her face went completely still. I watched the words sink in. "Logs?" She swallowed. "What logs?" "The ones your hospital gave us." The color drained from her face. Oddly enough, I didn't enjoy watching it happen. That surprised me. For all the anger I still carried, I didn't actually want to see her suffer. I simply refused to keep suffering so she could stay comfortable. "What did they show?" she whispered. "You should ask your lawyer." "Nolan, please." Her eyes filled with tears again. I was scared. Of losing me? She didn't answer. Not quickly enough. I gave her a sad smile. "No. You were scared of losing your career." The tears spilled over. "You don't understand what it took for me to become who I am. I paid for a lot of what it took." She looked at me. "You think paying the bills means you own my choices?" "No." I shook my head. "I think almost dying gives me the right to question them." She stepped closer to the door. "I made a bad decision. You created a false medical record." Her expression hardened. "I didn't write that note. Your login session edited it." She looked away. That was all the answer I needed. "Who helped you?" She looked back at me sharply. "No one." "Mara." I held her eyes. "No one." Another lie. But this one wasn't steady. I could see it shaking. My mind went to the nurse, the resident, the bed coordinator, all the people who worked beneath her authority. People who could have been pressured, intimidated, or used to protect her. "You're going to drag innocent staff down with you," I said. Her expression hardened. "Don't pretend this is about them. It became about them the moment you treated the hospital system like your personal favor bank." She stared at me as if she no longer recognized the man standing at the door. Good. The old Nolan would have softened. He would have unlocked the door, made her tea, sat beside her while she cried. And somehow, by the end of the conversation, he would have been the one apologizing for making her feel judged. That man never came home. He was left behind in Observation Bay 3. "I loved you," she whispered. I looked at her calmly. "No. You loved being loved by me." She stepped back as though the words had hit her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "Adrian was right." I waited. "You're only punishing me because you know I never got over him." The words hung between us. She didn't even realize what she'd admitted. I looked at her for a long moment. "Thank you." She frowned. "For what?" "For saving me years of wondering." Then I closed the door. She knocked once, then again. Then the knocking stopped. Through the window, I watched her stand on the porch for nearly a minute before finally walking away. She never looked back. Neither did I. The hospital's peer review wasn't a courtroom. Priya reminded me of that twice before we walked inside. "It's an internal review," she said. "They're trying to protect patients, limit liability, and preserve the hospital's credibility. They're not here to give you a dramatic moment." "I don't need a dramatic moment," I replied. She smiled. "Good. Because hospitals specialize in beige conference rooms and carefully chosen words." She was right. The committee room at St. Aurelia looked exactly like every hospital conference room I'd ever walked into. Beige walls. An oval conference table. Pitcher of water. A speakerphone in the middle. A framed mission statement about compassion hanging on the wall. Compassion. I almost laughed. Around the table sat the chief medical officer, the head of nursing, a representative from risk management, 2 physicians from the peer review panel, Evelyn Rusk, the hospital's attorney, and Mara. She wore a navy business suit instead of scrubs. Without her white coat, she looked less untouchable. Adrian wasn't there. Cowards rarely show up when facts are about to be examined. The chief medical officer, Dr. Kenji Sato, opened the meeting. Mr. Hale, first, we're glad you've recovered. Beside me, Priya quietly made a note. Thank you, I replied. Dr. Sato continued. We're here today to review the sequence of clinical decisions made on the evening of May 18th. Clinical decisions. That was the phrase Mara needed. Clinical decisions could be defended. Personal betrayals could not. The hospital attorney spoke next. This proceeding is confidential. Priya smiled politely. Subject to applicable law and my client's legal rights, of course. The attorney's smile disappeared. They asked Mara to speak first. She answered calmly. I'd seen this version of her many times before. Charity galas, department dinners, fundraisers, the polished physician who could earn a stranger's trust in less than a minute. At the time, she began, the emergency department was under extraordinary bed pressure. Mr. Hale had already received antibiotics and 4 fluids. His mental status remained intact. Mr. Cross presented with cardiac symptoms and a documented cardiac history. Based on the information available, I made a clinical judgment. One of the physicians on the review panel looked at her. Did Mr. Hale refuse transfer to the ICU? Mara hesitated. I was informed that he seemed reluctant. Priya looked up immediately. By whom? Mara briefly glanced toward the hospital attorney. I don't specifically recall. My chest tightened. Not because I was sick. Because I recognized exactly what she was doing. She wasn't just protecting herself anymore. She was getting ready to place the blame on someone lower in the chain of command. Dr. Sato looked down at the records. The medical chart states that the patient declined ICU transfer. Mara folded her hands neatly. I did not personally enter that note. Without saying a word, Priya slid a document across the table. No, she said, but your active login session opened the documentation field at 9:16 p.m. and your badge-accessed physician workstation C just 3 seconds before the edit. Mara's face stayed perfectly still. Only the muscles in her throat moved. The hospital attorney leaned forward. We should be careful about assuming that an active session proves who was actually using the workstation. Priya calmly placed another document on the table. Badge access. Workstation camera stills. Continuous login activity. The same user session also accessed Mr. Cross's chart and approved the ICU override at 9:19 p.m. The room fell completely silent. I looked across the table at Mara. She never looked back. Dr. Sato slowly adjusted his glasses. Dr. Vale. His voice was calm. Did you personally enter or modify any documentation indicating that Mr. Hale refused transfer to the ICU? When Mara answered, her voice was noticeably quieter. I may have, clarified. A note based on the circumstances. Clarified. Priya repeated the word softly. It landed in the room like a blade. The head of nursing leaned forward. Our staff statements indicate that Mr. Hale attempted to speak, but because of respiratory distress, he was unable to complete full sentences. Mara's eyes flashed. He said my name. I spoke before anyone else could. Saying my wife's name, I looked directly at her, is not the same as refusing life-saving treatment. For the first time, someone inside the hospital finally said what should have been obvious from the beginning. Mara's hands tightened. Dr. Sato turned another page in the file. Mr. Cross's ICU admission, he said. Negative troponins. Stable blood pressure. No documented sustained arrhythmia. No respiratory distress. Why was he admitted to the ICU instead of telemetry observation? Mara took a slow breath. I had clinical concerns based on his history. What history? She looked down. A previous myocarditis scare. Without saying a word, Priya slid another document across the table. Resolved 2 years earlier, she said. No current cardiology restrictions. She placed down another page. His attending physician assistant had recommended discharge after repeat labs. The hospital attorney frowned. How did you obtain Mr. Cross's medical information? Priya's smile cooled. From records produced by your own office after my client's legal team requested documents related to the bed reassignment that affected his treatment. She paused. If you believe your office violated privacy law while producing those records, we can certainly discuss that separately. The attorney said nothing. I almost admired her. Mara didn't. The color had drained from her face. Dr. Sato turned toward me. Mr. Hale, would you describe what you remember? I could have made it emotional. I could have talked about the bright ceiling lights, the fear, Adrian whispering beside my bed, the look on Mara's face. But facts had brought us into that room. Facts would finish it. I arrived with a high fever, low oxygen saturation, and dangerously low blood pressure. I was told ICU bed 7 had been assigned to me. I never refused that transfer. I heard Dr. Vale order the bed reassigned to Adrian Cross. I heard Nurse Monroe question that decision. I heard Dr. Vale instruct the staff to document me as stable for observation. I was moved to an observation area. My condition worsened. The next thing I remember is waking up in the ICU the following morning. I paused. Then I added one final sentence. The refusal note in my chart is false. For the first time during the meeting, Mara looked directly at me. Her eyes were full of tears. This time, I didn't look away to protect her. Dr. Sato asked another question. Did Dr. Vale ever ask you not to file a complaint? Yes. Before I could say anything else, Priya placed another document on the table. A transcript of a recorded conversation. Recorded legally under one-party consent. She looked toward the committee. Dr. Vale told Mr. Hale that filing a complaint could destroy everything she had worked for and asked him not to pursue it. The hospital attorney quietly closed his eyes for a moment. That was when I realized something had changed. They weren't protecting Mara anymore. Not because they'd suddenly found their conscience. Because the math had changed. Mara had become more expensive than the truth. The committee called a 20-minute recess. Out in the hallway, Mara caught up with me. Nolan. Before she could get any closer, Priya stepped between us. My client won't be discussing this privately. Mara ignored her. She looked straight at me. You enjoyed that. I stared at the woman who had once promised to love me in sickness and in health. No. You did. She frowned. What? Watching them question me. I shook my head. I watched them read what you did. Her lips trembled. You made me look like a monster. I answered quietly. No. The audit logs did. She lowered her voice. They don't know me. For a brief moment, I remembered the woman she'd once been. The exhausted medical student. The wife who held my hand at my father's funeral. The woman who slipped handwritten notes into my lunchbox when I worked double shifts. Maybe the committee didn't know that version of Mara. But neither did I anymore. Maybe, I said softly, they know the version that matters. She looked confused. What does that mean? It means they saw who you became when doing the right thing finally cost you something. The conference room door opened behind us. Dr. Sato called everyone back inside. The second half of the meeting didn't take long. The hospital announced that Dr. Maravale was being placed on immediate administrative leave while the investigation continued. They also confirmed they would self-report certain findings to the state medical board. Additional interviews with staff would follow. Mara sat frozen. Administrative leave. Self-report. Medical board. 3 simple phrases that hit harder than any insult ever could. The audit logs hadn't ended her career yet, but they had wrapped a hand around its throat. When the meeting ended, there were no reporters waiting outside. No dramatic music. No applause. Just a beige hallway. And Mara standing in it, watching the life she had chosen over mine begin to crack apart. As we walked toward the exit, her phone buzzed. She glanced down at the screen. Her face collapsed. I didn't ask what it said. I found out later. Adrian's message read, "I think it's better if we don't communicate until this blows over." The man she'd chosen was already running. 3 days later, Mara tried to reach Adrian. I only knew because she accidentally texted me instead of him. "Adrian, please answer. I need to know you'll tell them I was only trying to protect you." A minute later, another message arrived. "Ignore that." I stared at the screen. It felt as though the universe had placed another piece of evidence directly into my hands. I forwarded both messages to Priya. Her reply came almost immediately. "Do not respond. Preserve them." So I did. By then, preserving evidence had become the rhythm of my life. Screenshots, voicemails, letters, receipts, bank statements, old text messages where Mara insisted Adrian was fragile and needed someone who truly understood him. Screenshots of the nights I asked why Adrian kept calling after midnight. And the messages where she told me I was embarrassing her just for asking. When I looked at my marriage through evidence instead of memories, it became something entirely different. The happy photos were still there, but between them was another record. Who paid? Who apologized? Who adjusted? Who disappeared? Who kept asking for grace? And who kept spending it? On Friday, Priya called. Adrian gave his statement. I was sitting by the window, still weak but finally feeling stronger. What did he say? He claims Dr. Vale made the ICU decision on her own. He says he never asked for special treatment and had no idea another patient had already been assigned that bed. I looked out at the city. Of course, the man who had leaned over my bed and whispered, "She always comes when I need her," was now pretending he had no idea she'd come at someone else's expense. Can we prove otherwise? We can prove pressure. What do you mean? The hospital turned over the text messages Adrian sent to Mara before he arrived. They were sent to her hospital-issued phone. What did he write? Priya read them aloud. "I'm scared. I can't sit in the waiting room with everyone else. You know what happened last time. I need you. If Nolan is there, don't let him make this weird. Please, Mara. I need a real room, somewhere monitored. I can't stay out there." She paused. Then, after the bed assignment changed, he sent one more message. She read it slowly. "Thank you. I knew you'd choose what mattered." I closed my eyes. 8 words. That was my entire marriage. I knew you'd choose what mattered. And she had. "Use them," I said. "We will." That evening, Mara came back to the townhouse. This time she didn't knock. She simply sat on the front steps. A few minutes later, June called. "She's back." "Still wearing the sad face?" June snorted. "No. This one's real." I sighed. "I'll handle it." "You want me nearby?" I smiled. "You planning to fight an ER doctor?" "I've chased raccoons meaner than her." I opened the front door. Mara stood immediately. She looked exhausted. No makeup, no carefully arranged hair, no polished doctor mask. Just a tired woman. "Nolan. He lied. I didn't ask who. Neither of us needed to." "Adrian." Her mouth trembled. "He told them I acted alone." I leaned against the doorframe. "Didn't you?" "I was trying to help him." "That's not an answer." She wiped tears from her face. "He made it sound like I forced him into the ICU. Didn't you?" "He asked me for help. And I asked you for nothing." I could barely breathe. She flinched. "Good. Some truths are supposed to leave scars." "I know," she whispered. "I know that now." I shook my head. "No. You only know now because Adrian won't protect you." She looked up at me. "That's cruel." "It's true. I lost everything because of him. You risked everything because of him. You were married." She wrapped her arms around herself. The porch light made her look younger. For a moment she resembled the woman I'd once married. But grief isn't the same thing as repentance. Panic isn't accountability. I thought he needed me. I looked at her. "And what did you think I needed?" She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. I nodded. That's what I thought. She stepped closer. I need your help. There it was. Not forgiveness. Not understanding. Help. For a second, an old instinct stirred inside me. The urge to fix things. To rescue her. To make everything easier. Then I remembered observation Bay 3. I'm not your emergency contact anymore. Tears rolled down her face. How can you say that? Because you taught me. She shook her head. Nolan, I'm scared. The medical board. The hospital. My parents. Everyone. I looked at her quietly. Were you scared when you changed my chart? She froze. The street fell silent except for a passing car. Finally, she whispered, I didn't think you'd get worse. It was the closest thing to a confession she'd ever given me. Not I didn't do it. Not I'm innocent. Just, I didn't think you'd get worse. I tightened my grip on the doorframe. So you gambled. Her face crumpled. I thought you were strong. I almost laughed. Strong. The favorite word of people who expected you to carry what they couldn't. You thought I could survive being sacrificed. Nolan. No. That's exactly what happened. You looked at me and saw someone who could take it. You looked at Adrian and saw someone who shouldn't have to. She covered her mouth. I'm sorry. At last, the words came. Too late. Too small. And wrapped in the fear of losing everything. I looked at her for a long moment. I believe you're sorry now. Hope flickered across her face. Then I finished. But I don't believe you were sorry when I was the only one paying the price. The hope disappeared. Good. False hope is another kind of cruelty. My attorney will send the next round of documents, I said. Nolan, please, don't give them Adrian's text messages. I stared at her. Even now, after he'd lied, after he'd abandoned her, after he'd left her to face everything alone. She was still trying to protect him. My voice became perfectly flat. You came here to ask me to protect him. No, she said. I mean, if those text messages come out, they'll prove Adrian pressured me. And that you gave in. Yes. She lowered her head. I hate myself. I looked at her quietly. I'm not carrying that anymore. She looked up. What? Your guilt. Your shame. Your fear. I carried your exhaustion. Your debt. Your family. Your moods. Your ambition. And your unfinished love story with Adrian. I'm done carrying things that belong to you. Then I closed the door. This time she didn't knock again. Through the window, I watched her sit back down on the front steps, crying into her hands. A year earlier, I would have opened the door before she finished her first sob. That night, I switched off the porch light. A few weeks later, Saint Aurelia offered mediation before Mara's medical board hearing. Priya called it containment disguised as concern. I called it predictable. The meeting took place in a private law office downtown instead of the hospital. They called it neutral ground. It didn't feel neutral. Priya and I sat on one side of the table. Across from us were the hospital's attorney, the risk management executive, and a senior administrator I'd never met. Mara wasn't there. That mattered. The hospital was no longer treating my complaint as an attack on one of their doctors. They were treating Mara as a liability. The risk executive spoke first. Mr. Hale, what happened to you fell below the standard of care we expect. Priya wrote something in her notebook. I stayed silent. The attorney continued. The hospital is prepared to offer a formal written apology, payment of all medical expenses related to this incident, and a confidential settlement. There it is, Priya said quietly. The attorney looked at her. Confidentiality is standard. Priya met his eyes. Silence is expensive. And protecting Dr. Vale is not part of this negotiation. The senior administrator shifted in his chair. We're not here to protect any individual physician. Priya smiled politely. Excellent. Then the agreement won't prevent Mr. Hale from cooperating with the medical board, law enforcement, or any licensing investigation. The attorney hesitated. That hesitation said more than his words ever could. I leaned forward. I want the apology to clearly state that I never refused the ICU transfer. The room went quiet. The risk executive nodded slowly. We can include that. And I wanted to state that my medical record contained inaccurate documentation. The attorney cleared his throat. We may prefer wording such as documentation inconsistency. No. Priya's voice remained calm. My client isn't settling for carefully written poetry. I almost smiled. The hospital attorney rubbed his forehead. Fine. We'll state that the documentation was inaccurate. And one more thing, I said. I want Nurse Tessa Monroe protected. The administrator looked surprised. Nurse Monroe. She questioned the transfer. She spoke up when my condition deteriorated. She told the truth. If anyone retaliates against her, this won't end quietly. For the first time that day, I saw genuine respect in the risk executive's expression. We have no intention of retaliating. Good. Put that in writing. They did. The meeting lasted 4 hours. By the end, the hospital had agreed to more than they wanted. And less than I deserved. That's usually how settlements work. I didn't sign that day. Priya wanted a few revisions. I wanted time to think. As we walked out of the building, my phone rang. Mara. I let it go to voicemail. Then another voicemail arrived. Then a text. I know you met with them. Please don't sign anything that makes me sound like a criminal. I laughed in the parking garage. Not because it was funny. Because the only other option was screaming. Priya looked at me. What? I handed her my phone. She read the message, then gave it back. She still thinks the wording is the problem. She always has. That night, Mara didn't come to the townhouse. She came to the parking garage of my apartment building. After the separation, I'd moved into a short-term rental. The townhouse locks had been changed legally, and arrangements had been made for Mara to collect her belongings under supervision. She hated that more than the separation itself. A house without me paying for it no longer felt like home. I was walking from my car when she stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. I stopped. This isn't appropriate. I needed to see you. You need to contact my attorney. Rain had soaked her hair. Her coat clung to her shoulders. They suspended my hospital privileges. I heard. My department won't even talk to me. I didn't answer. My father says I embarrassed the family. That sounds like Richard. My mother says I should have handled you better. That sounds like Celeste. Landon asked if you'd still pay his rent if I apologized publicly. That sounds like Landon. She swallowed hard. And Adrian. Her voice broke. Adrian blocked me. For a moment, I watched everything she'd built collapse around her. Not love. Structure. The family that praised her only when she was useful. The ex who needed her only when it benefited him. The hospital that celebrated her until she became a legal risk. She had chosen all of them over me. Now every one of them had walked away. Now every one of them was stepping away from the fire. I'm sorry, Mara whispered. I believed she was hurting. I just didn't confuse her pain with accountability. Mara, go home. I don't have one. The townhouse. You changed the locks. You moved out 2 weeks ago. I thought you'd calm down. I slowly shook my head. She still didn't understand. I almost died. Her face crumpled. I know. No. You know there were consequences. That's not the same thing. She took a small step toward me. Tell me what to do. Take responsibility. I am. No. You're looking for the version of responsibility that ends with someone rescuing you. She flinched. I kept going. Call your lawyer. Tell the truth. Stop contacting Adrian. Stop contacting me outside of legal counsel. And stop acting like the problem is how this looks instead of what you actually did. Tears streamed down her face. I loved you. I know. That was the only kindness I could still offer. Because I did know. Once, in another time, in another version of our lives, Mara really had loved me. But love that disappears the moment an ex comes back isn't a marriage. Love that sacrifices you, then asks you to protect the person holding the knife, isn't a love anyone can survive. She reached for my hand. I stepped back. Her hand fell to her side. That tiny movement hurt more than I expected. "Nolan," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Is there any way back?" I thought about ICU bed 7. About Adrian smiling beside my stretcher. About the false refusal note. About the first thing she said after I survived almost dying. Not "How are you?" Not "I'm sorry." But "You filed a complaint." No. She closed her eyes. Not even "Someday." No. I walked past her. Behind me she said, "The audit logs are going to end my career." I stopped and turned. "No, Mara. Your choices are ending your career. The audit logs just refused to lie." Then I walked away. She stayed standing in the parking garage while rainwater dripped from her coat onto the concrete. The state medical board hearing wasn't public the way people imagine from television. There were no cameras, no packed courtroom, no judge pounding a gavel. But there were witnesses, transcripts, evidence, attorneys, and a panel with the authority to decide whether Dr. Mara Vale should ever practice medicine again. That was public enough. Mara arrived with her attorney, Franklin Moss. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. Adrian arrived separately. That surprised me until Priya leaned over and quietly said, "Subpoena." He wore a dark suit and the uneasy expression of a man who regretted every text message he'd ever sent. Good. Tessa Monroe was there too. She sat 2 rows behind me with her hands folded tightly in her lap. When I looked back, she gave me a small nod. I nodded back. The hearing began with opening summaries. The board investigator presented the case in a calm, almost emotionless voice. Somehow that made the facts sound even worse. Patient Nolan Hale presented with suspected sepsis. ICU consultation accepted. ICU bed assigned. Assignment changed. Patient transferred to observation. Medical record documented refusal. Patient deteriorated. Audit trail inconsistent with refusal documentation. Physician conflict of interest involving alternate patient Adrian Cross. Alternate patient did not clearly meet ICU admission criteria. Respondent physician Dr. Mara Vale accessed and modified records after the disputed transfer. Every sentence felt like another brick. By the time the investigator finished, Mara was sitting behind a wall she could no longer climb over. Her attorney tried to make the board see her as a person. Dr. Vale has an exemplary professional record. She has made hundreds of difficult decisions under extreme pressure. Emergency medicine requires clinical discretion. Documentation mistakes happen in chaotic environments. No malicious intent has been established. Then Priya stood. She never raised her voice. She simply displayed the timeline on the screen. 9:14 p.m. ICU bed 7 assigned to Nolan Hale. 9:15 p.m. Dr. Vale accesses Nolan Hale's chart. 9:16 p.m. Refusal language added. 9:18 p.m. Dr. Vale accesses Adrian Cross's chart. 9:19 p.m. ICU override entered for Adrian Cross. 9:22 p.m. Adrian transported to ICU. 9:37 p.m. Nolan Hale placed in observation bay 3. 12:31 a.m. Nolan rapidly deteriorates. 12:42 a.m. Dr. Vale accesses Nolan Hale's chart again. The room became completely still. Audit logs are merciless. They make memory unnecessary. Mara's attorney argued context. Priya answered with timestamps. He argued pressure. She answered with vital signs. He argued medical judgment. She answered with hospital policy. Then Tessa was called to testify. She looked nervous as she took her seat. The board chair asked, "Did Mr. Hale refuse the ICU transfer?" "No." "Did he express hesitation?" "No." "He tried to speak, but he was struggling to breathe." "Did you question the reassignment?" "Yes." "To whom?" "Dr. Vale." "What was her response?" Tessa swallowed hard. "She told me she had given the order." Mara kept staring at the table. The board chair asked one more question. "Were you pressured to document anything that wasn't accurate?" Tessa hesitated. Priya's eyes narrowed slightly. The entire room waited. Tessa looked at Mara, then at me, then back at the board. After Mr. Hale's condition got worse, a supervising physician instructed me to make sure my note reflected that he had been stable when he was moved. The room fell silent. The board chair looked at Tessa. "Who gave you that instruction?" Her voice trembled. "Dr. Vale." Mara immediately whispered, "That's not what I meant." Her attorney gently touched her arm, trying to stop her. It was too late. The statement was already part of the official record. After lunch, Adrian was called to testify. He chose his words carefully. "I was frightened," he said. "I contacted Dr. Vale because I trusted her medical judgment." The board investigator asked, "Did you ask Dr. Vale for an ICU room?" "I asked for monitoring." "Did you know Mr. Hale had already been assigned ICU bed 7? "No." Priya stood. "Mr. Cross, I'd like to show you one of your text messages." She projected it onto the screen. "Thank you. I knew you'd choose what mattered." She looked at him. "What exactly did you mean by that?" His expression changed. "I was emotional. What mattered?" "My health." He hesitated. "I didn't know Mr. Hale's condition." Priya clicked to the next exhibit. A still image from the emergency department security camera appeared on the screen. It showed Adrian standing outside my treatment curtain, looking directly toward my bed. This image was taken at 9:12 p.m. "Before the transfer," Priya said. "Is that you?" "Yes." "Did you see Mr. Hale receiving oxygen?" "I'm not a doctor." "But you saw him." "Yes." She asked one final question. "Did you later tell Mr. Hale? She always comes when I need her?" His attorney objected. The board allowed a limited answer. Adrian looked down. "I don't recall. It was the kind of lie cowards tell, because saying yes would destroy them, and saying no could be disproved." Then it was Mara's turn. I thought I would feel satisfied. Instead, I just felt tired. She raised her right hand and swore to tell the truth. Her voice cracked when she said the word truth. Her attorney guided her through the questions. She said she had been exhausted. She said the emergency department had been overwhelmed. She said Adrian's previous medical scare had influenced her judgment. She admitted she should have stepped aside because of her personal relationship with him. She admitted the documentation had been mishandled. Mishandled. Even then, she couldn't bring herself to say falsified. Then the board investigator asked the question that ended everything. "Dr. Vale, why did you access Mr. Hale's chart again at 12:42 a.m.? After his condition deteriorated?" Mara opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The investigator waited. She looked at her attorney. He lowered his eyes. Finally, she whispered, "I wanted to understand what had happened." The investigator turned another page. At 12:43 a.m. An addendum was saved stating that the patient had been informed of the observation plan and agreed to it. He looked directly at her. "Is that your addendum?" Mara began to cry. Not loudly, quietly, the way people cry when they realize there are no doors left to close. "Yes." No one gasped. Real consequences rarely arrive with drama. They simply appear and stay. The board chair asked one last question. "Was that statement accurate?" Mara covered her mouth. Then she answered, "No." There it was. The word I had waited so long to hear. No. The note wasn't accurate. I had never refused treatment. I had never agreed to stay in observation. I hadn't sacrificed myself. I had been sacrificed. The board called another recess. Outside the hearing room, Mara tried to walk toward me. Priya stepped between us. Mara looked past her. "Nolan, I admitted it. I told the truth." I met her eyes. "You told the truth after the audit logs made lying impossible." She closed her eyes. "Doesn't that count for something?" "It does." Hope flickered across her face. "It counts for the record." Her expression collapsed. I walked away before pity had the chance to become weakness. 2 weeks later, the medical board announced its interim decision. Mara's medical license was suspended while the investigation continued. She was ordered to complete an ethics evaluation and referred for further professional conduct proceedings. The same day, Saint Aurelia terminated her employment. The news spread through the local medical community before sunset. By midnight, she was no longer known as Dr. Mara Vale of Saint Aurelia. She had become a cautionary story. The emergency physician who gave her husband's ICU bed to her ex. The doctor whose own audit logs ended her career. Our divorce mediation took place on a Thursday morning in a conference room with no windows. Mara arrived before I did. That was new. For most of our marriage, I had been the one waiting. Waiting at restaurants. Waiting at family gatherings. Waiting at fertility appointments we never finished because Adrian always seemed to call at the worst possible moment. Waiting at my mother's memorial service, where Mara arrived 40 minutes late, saying the ER had been busy. Later, I found a photo of her having coffee with Adrian that same morning. Waiting had become my native language. Now, she was the one waiting for me. When I walked into the room, relief flashed across her face for just a second, as if seeing me meant there was still a door left open. There wasn't. Priya sat beside me. Franklin Moss sat beside Mara. Between us sat the mediator, wearing the tired expression of someone who had watched too many people mistake entitlement for love. The legal issues themselves were simple. Priya had made sure of that. The townhouse had been mine before we married. My retirement accounts clearly showed what I had built before the wedding. Our joint savings would be divided according to the law after the proper reimbursements. Most of Mara's medical school debt had been paid during our marriage with my income, but we were not asking for repayment beyond the legal offsets. The car lease would either be transferred to Mara or terminated. There would be no spousal support because of her earning potential and everything that had happened. Mara immediately objected. "I'm unemployed," she said. Priya answered calmly, "Temporarily, because of professional misconduct." Franklin Moss winced. The mediator cleared her throat. "Let's keep the language neutral." Priya glanced down at the paperwork. "Fine. Temporarily due to conduct that resulted in professional discipline." I almost smiled. Mara didn't. She kept looking at me. "You promised you'd never leave me helpless." I folded my hands. "I promised to be your husband. You stopped being my wife." She shook her head. "That's not fair." "No," I replied. "It's simply the truth." Her expression tightened. Franklin leaned over and whispered something to her, but she brushed him off. "All these years," she said, "you were keeping score." The room fell silent. I looked at her and answered, "No, Mara, that was the problem. I never did." She blinked. "I didn't keep score when I paid your exam fees. I didn't keep score when you forgot my birthdays. I didn't keep score when your mother called my family ordinary. I didn't keep score when Adrian texted you during our anniversary dinner, and you left the table to comfort him." Her face crumpled. I didn't think you noticed." I almost laughed. People who mistreat someone often mistake patience for blindness. "I noticed everything," I said quietly. "I just loved you more than I respected myself." The mediator looked down at her papers. Franklin looked deeply uncomfortable. Mara whispered, "And now I respect myself enough to leave." She broke down crying. These weren't the carefully controlled tears she had shown before. They were exhausted, messy, and real. "I don't have Adrian. I don't have the hospital. My parents are furious. Landon says I ruined his life. I don't even know who I am anymore." I believed her. It was the first completely honest thing she had said without trying to defend herself. But honesty after destroying everything doesn't rebuild what was lost. "It's not my job to tell you who you are," I said. "It used to be." "No. I only convinced myself that was love." Franklin slid a revised proposal across the table. Mara wanted 6 months of exclusive use of the townhouse, continued health insurance support, and help paying her legal fees. Priya didn't even bother picking it up. "No." Mara's eyes flashed. "You won't even read it?" "I already read it when your attorney emailed it," Priya replied. Mara looked back at me. "Nolan, I have nowhere stable to go. Your parents have 5 bedrooms. My mother says I brought shame into her house. Then that's something you and your mother need to work out." She stared at me. "You've become cold." No, I answered. I've become unavailable for exploitation. The mediator cleared her throat, and we continued working through property, furniture, bank accounts, insurance, and every other dull detail that comes with ending a marriage. Then Franklin made one mistake. He brought up reputation. My client would appreciate a mutual non-disparagement clause that prevents further personal harm. Priya smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. My client is happy to agree not to lie. He will not agree to pretend documented facts never happened. Franklin replied, "Public discussion benefits no one." I looked at Mara. "Did you believe that when your family told people I was unstable?" Her face went pale. I opened my folder and laid several printed screenshots on the table. There was Celeste's message in the family group chat. "Nolan has become obsessive after a hospital misunderstanding." Then Landon's. "The guy's just bitter because Mara outgrew him." One of the cousins had written, "He always seemed insecure." Then there was Mara's own message. "Please don't engage with him. He's not himself." I looked straight at her. "You called me unstable before the board even confirmed the false note." She covered her face. "I was scared. You keep saying that like fear excuses everything." The mediator quietly read through the screenshots without changing her expression. Priya spoke next. "Any non-disparagement clause must clearly exclude truthful statements, legal filings, sworn testimony, and responses to defamatory claims made by Dr. Vale or her family." Franklin sighed. "Fine." Just then my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. The message was from an unknown number. "Tell Mara to stop contacting me. I'm serious." Another message followed. "This is Adrian Cross. I don't want to be involved in your divorce anymore." I stared at the screen for a moment before sliding the phone across the table to Mara. She read the messages. Every bit of color drained from her face. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Then she let out one short, broken laugh. "He sent that to you?" she asked quietly. "Yes," I answered. Her hand trembled as she pushed the phone back across the table. "I destroyed my life for a man who ended up sending my husband a message asking to be left alone." I didn't correct her. She was almost right. She hadn't destroyed her life for a man. She had destroyed it through her own choices. That afternoon, she signed the preliminary settlement. She got no claim to the townhouse, no financial support, no payment for her legal fees, and no promise of silence beyond the truth. As we walked out, she followed me to the elevator. "Nolan." I stopped. She stood a few feet away, clutching the folder against her chest. "I know you won't believe me, but I am sorry. Not just because I lost everything. I'm sorry because when I saw the timeline during the hearing, I finally understood what you saw." She paused, swallowing hard. "You were dying. And I was worried about how everything looked." It was the most honest thing she had ever said. I nodded. "Hold on to that." Tears filled her eyes. "Does that mean anything?" "Yes." "What?" "It means maybe you'll never do that to another patient." The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. She stayed where she was. As the doors closed, she whispered, "I miss you." I looked at her one last time. "I miss the person I thought you were." Then the doors shut, and for the first time since that night in the ER, I took a deep breath without feeling pain. The final divorce decree arrived on a Monday. I signed it at 9:12 that morning. Mara signed hers at 11:47. By noon, we were officially divorced. 7 years of marriage ended with digital signatures, legal stamps, and an email from Priya that simply read, "It's done. Proud of you." I sat at my kitchen table staring at the screen for a long time. I expected to feel victorious, but instead I felt calm. Then I realized why. Victory is only loud when you still want the person who hurt you to hear it. I didn't. 3 weeks later, the hospital settlement became final. The written apology clearly stated that I had never refused ICU transfer and that inaccurate information had been entered into my medical record. St. Aurelia covered every medical expense related to the incident and introduced new conflict of interest policies for emergency admissions. Tessa Monroe kept her job. She sent me one text, "They're upset, but they're being careful." I replied, "Thank you." You told the truth when it mattered. She answered, "Thank you." Mara's licensing case took much longer. Professional consequences always move slowly, but they do move. Her medical license remained suspended for a set period, followed by probation, mandatory supervision, ethics training, and restrictions that made returning to emergency medicine almost impossible. Saint Aurelia never hired her back, and no major hospital in the city was willing to take her. Her name continued to circulate quietly through medical circles. Never in a way that crossed legal lines, but clearly enough that people knew who she was. Dr. Mara Vale, the ER physician who reassigned her husband's ICU bed to her ex, documented that he refused care when he hadn't, and whose own audit logs proved the truth. Adrian Cross tried to disappear into the private wellness industry, but it didn't work. His text messages became part of the proceedings and damaged his reputation. Investors pulled out of his boutique clinic project. A local journalist published a carefully written article about personal influence and emergency care without naming anyone. But the people who needed to understand the story did. The clinic never opened. The last I heard, Adrian had moved to Arizona and started selling executive stress retreats online. Somehow it suited him. A man who had spent years creating emergencies for attention had finally turned that into a business. Mara's family changed too, though none of it mattered to me anymore. Celeste mailed me a handwritten 3-page letter blaming Adrian. The hospital, the pressure of medicine, modern divorce culture, my attorney, and finally, the hardness that entered your heart. She blamed everyone except Mara and herself. I never answered. Richard called once from an unknown number and asked if we could separate personal matters from helping with his medical insurance premiums. I blocked the number. Landon sent me a message saying he hoped I was happy after ruining everyone's lives. I replied with a thumbs-up emoji and blocked him too. Sometimes the smallest satisfactions are still satisfying. 2 months after the divorce, I returned to St. Aurelia for a follow-up appointment. This time I went to pulmonology, not the ER. Different floor, different smell, but the same fluorescent lights. I thought walking back into the building would be difficult. Instead, as I crossed the lobby, I realized something. Buildings only hold power over you while you're still trapped inside them. I wasn't trapped anymore. After my appointment, Tessa spotted me near the coffee kiosk. She was wearing scrubs, her hair tied back neatly, her badge clipped perfectly in place. She smiled when she saw me. "You look annoyingly healthy." I smiled back. "I'll take annoyingly." She laughed. "Good." We stood there for a moment, both a little awkward, until she finally said, "I heard the divorce is official." It did. "You okay?" I thought about lying but decided not to. Some days are better than others. "It gets better," she said. She stirred her coffee for a moment before speaking again. "For what it's worth, people around here talk about the case now like the answer was obvious. It wasn't. Not that night. Not to everyone. You asking for names, remembering the times, insisting on getting the records. That made the difference. I was barely conscious. You were conscious enough." I glanced toward the entrance to the ER. "Did you ever figure out why she did it?" Tessa's expression softened. "I don't think there's a satisfying answer." "No?" She shook her head. "No. Some people get so used to deciding whose pain matters that they stop seeing everyone else's." Those words stayed with me. Some people get used to deciding whose pain matters. Mara counted Adrian's fear. She counted her parents' comfort. She counted her reputation, her career, her image, and even her own guilt. The only thing she failed to count was my life, until the audit logs forced her to. As I walked out of the hospital, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but the preview caught my eye. "Nolan, this is Mara. Please just read this once." I stopped near the curb, the afternoon sun warming the sidewalk, and opened the message. "I know I have no right to contact you. My therapist says making amends isn't the same as asking for forgiveness, and I'm trying to understand the difference. I'm not asking you to come back. I know you won't." I kept reading. "I lost my job because of what I did. I lost my license because of what I wrote in your chart. I lost you because I treated your love like something that would always be there. The hardest part is remembering your face in the ER. I remember thinking, Nolan will understand. That thought haunts me every day. I used your kindness as permission. My grip tightened around the phone. I'm sorry I gave him your ICU bed. I'm sorry I lied in your medical record. I'm sorry I asked you to protect me from the consequences instead of protecting you when you needed me. A year earlier, those words would have broken me. Now they landed in a place that had already healed. The message ended with one final sentence. I hope someday your life feels light again. You deserved better than me. I stood there for a long time. Finally, I replied, I hope you become someone who never does that again. I didn't write take care. I didn't write I forgive you. I didn't write goodbye. Some doors don't need to be slammed. They just need to be closed. Then I blocked the number. That evening I drove home. My townhouse. June had helped me repaint the living room. The wedding photo was gone. Mara's coats no longer filled the closet. The kitchen shelves held the mugs I actually liked instead of the matching set she bought for guests who rarely came over. I stepped onto the rooftop deck. Below me, the city glowed with gold reflections against glass buildings. For years, I had mistaken endurance for devotion. I believed that if I loved enough, gave enough, and understood enough, the woman beside me would eventually turn around and truly see me. But some people don't appreciate the bridge until they've burned it. And sometimes a man doesn't realize he's free until he stops rebuilding it. People would later say the audit logs ended Mara's career. It made for a clean headline. But it wasn't entirely true. The logs didn't end her career. They ended her lies. Her career ended because, beneath the white coat, beneath the degrees, beneath the calm voice and flawless signatures, she made a choice that no doctor, no wife, and no decent human being should ever make. She gave my ICU bed to her ex. Then she tried to make my silence part of the treatment. But I survived. I remembered. I asked for my records. And when the truth finally appeared, line by line, timestamp by timestamp, click by click, I never had to raise my voice. The very system she trusted to hide behind became the witness she couldn't persuade. As the sun disappeared behind the skyline, my phone stayed silent. No messages from Mara. No calls from Celeste. No Adrian. No hospital alarms. Just the wind, distant traffic, and the steady rhythm of my own breathing. For the first time in years, nobody needed me to make myself smaller so they could feel comfortable. Nobody expected me to keep understanding while they took what was mine. Nobody dismissed my pain as an overreaction. I lifted my coffee toward the city, not to celebrate Mara's downfall, but to honor the simple fact that I had survived. Then I turned, walked back inside, and closed the door. There was no room left for her lies. And there was no place left for her in my life. The end.